They say graduation is a time of pride, of joy, of fresh beginnings. For my daughter, it was all of that. For me, it was the end of something I should have walked away from years ago. The sky was clear, the chairs were set, the speeches were cheesy but sweet. Parents cried, kids took selfies in their robes. It was perfect, until my husband stood up. He tapped his glass, smiled, cleared his throat, and said, "Today marks a new chapter for all of us." I knew what was coming. I'd known for months, but he thought he was being brave, that making a public announcement about our mutual separation would earn him sympathy points, that he could shatter our marriage with applause in the background. What he didn't know was that while he was rehearsing his little breakup speech, I was preparing something far more powerful. So I stood, walked to him, and handed him an envelope. He smiled at first, probably thinking it was a card, a thank you, a peace offering. Then he opened it and saw the truth, my truth, the truth I'd been quietly building, piece by piece, while he played house with his assistant and stole from our daughter's future. He thought that day would be his big exit, but I made sure it was my beginning. David was never the kind of man who swept you off your feet. He was the man who pulled out your chair, who remembered your coffee order, who showed up on time and called when he said he would. He wasn't exciting, he was safe. That's what I wanted back then. Stability, someone who made sense, and for a while he was that. We married in our late 20s, bought a modest home. We weren't rich, but we worked hard. I was teaching part-time at the local college while raising our daughter, Emma. He climbed the ladder at a corporate firm, slowly but surely. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family, the kind you put on Christmas cards. But the cracks were always there, subtle at first. David started working late more often. At first it was just a few extra hours, then it was overnight trips, then entire weekends at conferences. He said he was tired, stressed, that he needed space. I believed him. I offered solutions, date nights, therapy, family weekends. He always had a reason to say no. He stopped complimenting me, stopped asking about my day. I felt like a ghost in my own marriage, present but invisible. When I brought it up, he deflected. "You're always looking for something wrong. Can't you just be happy for once?" I started second-guessing myself. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I wasn't trying hard enough. So I did more. I took over everything. School meetings, bills, Emma's rehearsals, dinners, holidays. I carried the weight of 3 people just to keep us standing. But no matter what I did, David kept drifting, like he was in a relationship I didn't have access to anymore. There were no more gifts, no anniversary plans, no real conversations, just surface-level noise, work updates, grocery lists, reminders. One night I walked into his office to ask if he wanted the tea. He had headphones in, watching a movie. I asked what he was watching. He looked annoyed, like I'd interrupted something sacred. I never asked again. That's when I realized I hadn't just lost his love. I'd lost his attention, his curiosity, his respect. But I stayed for Emma, for the house, for the years already spent. I told myself, this is just a phase. He'll come back to me. I didn't realize he had already left. All that was missing was the announcement. The truth came to me quietly, like everything else with David. It didn't explode. It whispered. It was a Tuesday. I was sorting laundry. His work slacks were inside out, pockets bunched. I felt something small and stiff tucked into the fabric. It was a receipt, from a restaurant we'd never been to, dinner for two, $187, on a night he told me he was in Boston for meetings. I Googled the name. It wasn't in Boston. It was in our city. That night, while he was showering, I opened the drawer he thought I never used, bottom left, under the folders. There it was, a second phone, unlocked. Messages from Jenna, dozens of them, photos, emojis, voice notes that made my stomach turn. He told her things he hadn't said to me in years, that she made him feel alive, that she was his real home, that he couldn't wait to start over. She called Emma the obstacle. I took a screenshot of that one first. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was financial. I checked our accounts, the ones he assumed I didn't know how to access. I tracked recurring transfers, vague consulting payments, excessive ATM withdrawals near Jenna's apartment, and luxury purchases listed under his company card. He wasn't just cheating, he was stealing from our future, from our daughter. Our college fund for Emma, drained by $18,000 in 6 months, reclassified as temporary loan reallocations. That was the moment I stopped crying. I started organizing. I bought a fresh notebook, not for feelings, for facts, dates, times, names, account numbers. I logged everything like a case file. I met with a family lawyer, then a financial analyst, then a woman named Monica who handled divorce for high-profile clients. She gave me a checklist, and I followed it like scripture. I moved Emma's education savings to a new account under my name. I rerouted my salary to a private bank. I opened a P.O. box and started receiving copies of every financial record I could pull. He didn't notice. He was too distracted building a new life while trying to keep the old one looking respectable. I let him, because the more confident he got, the sloppier he became. One evening, Emma came home from school with a handmade card. Inside, she had drawn our family, just the two of us, her and me. I asked why Daddy wasn't in the picture. She said, "He's always on his phone. He's always busy. I didn't think he'd mind." That night, I decided to give her something better than a broken home pretending to function. I decided to give her the truth. Emma's graduation day arrived on a rare June morning that felt like a promise. Warm air, blue sky, and enough sunlight to convince you that everything was right in the world. David was on his best behavior. He wore a suit I'd bought him 3 years ago and brought a bouquet of sunflowers for Emma. He looked like the model husband, the perfect father. I knew it was all for show. He stood next to me during the ceremony, smiled during the speeches, clapped too loudly when Emma's name was called. To anyone else, we looked happy, stable. But beneath that tailored suit and polished grin was a man counting down the minutes to his escape. I let him believe he still had the upper hand. After the ceremony, we rented out a small hall for a family celebration. Balloons, a catered lunch, framed photos of Emma growing up. I'd organized it all, even though I knew what was coming. David clinked his glass, cleared his throat. Everyone looked up. He smiled at our daughter, then at me, and then he began. Today isn't just about Emma starting a new chapter. It's also about honesty, about fresh starts. So, I want you all to know, with love and respect, that narrator and I are going our separate ways. It's mutual. We've agreed to part as friends, and we remain committed to co-parenting Emma with love. There was a beat of silence, gasps, eyes shifting. I watched as my sister looked at me with horror, as Emma's face twisted in confusion. David looked proud, as if he'd just delivered a TED Talk on emotional maturity. Then I stood, calm, silent, and walked across the room. I handed him a white envelope, thick, heavy, sealed. He gave a little laugh, thought it was a letter, maybe a thank you or forgiveness. He opened it. Inside, divorce papers, signed, a full financial breakdown of his embezzlement from the college fund, screenshots of texts to Jenna, a forensic accountant's report, and a letter addressed to his firm's HR director, already delivered that morning. His smile collapsed. His hands trembled. His eyes scanned the first few lines, then darted up to mine. I leaned in and whispered, "You wanted a fresh start? You're going to get one. With nothing." Emma stared at both of us. She asked, "What's happening?" Before David could speak, I told her the truth, calmly, clearly, and without shame. "Your dad hasn't been honest. Not with me, not with you, but I've taken care of everything. Your college fund is safe. You are safe." David tried to explain, said it was more complicated, but the room had already shifted. Jenna, yes, she came, had left quietly about 10 minutes into his speech. I watched her car peel out of the parking lot. David walked out 5 minutes later. No goodbyes, just silence. And I stood there, holding Emma's hand, in a room full of people who finally saw the truth. It's funny how people show up once the truth does. For years, I felt like I was invisible in my own marriage. But the moment David walked out of that hall, people finally looked at me and saw not just a wife, but a woman who had been surviving with grace while he was slipping away with excuses. The documents I gave him, already filed. The financial audit, already submitted to the board of his firm. Within 2 weeks, he was placed on leave. The Internal Ethics Committee found enough evidence to terminate him, quietly, to avoid scandal. He tried to fight for half the house, but I had the receipts, literally. Every shady transfer, every personal expense disguised as a business write-off. He left with a suitcase, his car, and a lawyer who stopped returning his calls after the third bounced check. I stayed in the house. I remodeled the kitchen. I turned his office into a reading room for Emma. I started consulting again, quietly at first. Then a client referred another and another. I built something real, something mine. I even gave a talk at Emma's school about women in leadership. Afterwards, she hugged me and said, "You were the strongest person in the room." That meant more than any victory in court ever could. Emma didn't ask about her father much. I told her the truth, not all at once, but enough. Enough for her to understand that love doesn't excuse betrayal. She started therapy. So did I. We cooked together, read together, learned how to laugh again without waiting for silence to fall afterward. David texted me 6 months later, said he was sorry, said he never meant for it to go so far, that he hoped we could heal eventually. I didn't respond, not because I hate him, but because I no longer need anything from him, not an apology, not an explanation. He stood up at our daughter's graduation and tried to rewrite our story with a microphone and a lie. I let him finish his speech, and then I handed him the truth, not to destroy him, but to free myself. He left the celebration thinking he was making an announcement. I left, knowing I'd just delivered the ending, and the beginning of something far, far better.